This is the September 9th Open Space Advisory Committee meeting. I am Chairperson Tricia Dunham. Go that way.
Vice Chair Ken Lish.
Jill Kenny. Fiona Boger.
Jim Heidel.
Matt Morris.
Great. We do have quorum in the room, so that's great for tonight for anything we need to vote on. First up is public comment. Matt, are you here to comment or just listen? Okay. Thanks. There's no one else in the room, so I would say we'll skip over public comment unless folks arrive. We can go back to it. Updates and look ahead. So for the town center.
I don't have anything for the town center.
Okay. I did want to say that I've reached back out to Patrick, and since it's an active construction site, we haven't been able to get back on and look. I know some folks wanted to go out and redo the Coal Creek corridor, the creek corridor, but until they say that it's safe for us to go on there, we're not going to be able to get out there since it's an active site. I do believe on the September 14th town meeting, is there something up in front of the board, or that's
there may
where
be something coming up?
There, or might be coming back. Mm-hmm. Just one of the things that we've been talking about, Ken, Allison, and I, is that some of these PDFs are going to be coming. Sorry, FDPs, right? FDPs. Just like a PDF. FDPs are going to be coming now at a more frequent basis, so we might want to look at that as a committee and see how we can commit members to come to town meetings, so folks can just think about that as their schedules as we go into the fall. That would be great. Next on the agenda, we have the Star Party recap, which was a great event. I went with my family, and it was wonderful. We were saying a little bit earlier that we did encounter some smoke pollution due to the fires, but we could still see Saturn, which I have to say looks like someone, and they told us this when they were talking about it, that it would look like someone just stuck a fake picture at the bottom of at the end of the telescope, because that's what it kind of looks like. But it was great. We saw the moon. My boys loved it. It was a great event.
Well, I really appreciate that you came out and volunteered, Patricia. That was great. And we had about 65 people that came, and lots of kids, lots of excited kids, and everything went off pretty well.
It did, including the sprinklers.
But on a side area, not where anyone was walking
it was fine.
through.
It was just I have to say, it's the Longmont. It was at Longmont Star. Who's the group that brought the telescopes?
The Longmont Astronomy and Space Society.
Yes, they were great, and really was wonderful that they volunteered their scopes. Some of them were incredible, and I thought they were generous to do that and brave with the number of kids that wanted to be near them.
Mike Galetta, committee member here. Sorry I'm late.
Thanks. So that moves us on to number 4. And actually, I'm going to wait just a moment because I see 2 members coming in.
Or you have another member.
Yep.
Else sit out here.
Okay. That's perfect. Sandy, if you just want to announce yours.
Bennington liaison.
When he gets in. So we've moved on to agenda item number 4, and that's the continued discussion and recommendation for the 5-year trails plan, which is in front of you. And I know that you guys discussed, I think, last month when I wasn't here. Do you want to give a brief update on last month?
Yeah, so Last month, we didn't go over too much since we didn't have quorum present. However, one of the things that was addressed is during the meeting that we had with the ProStack leadership, ProStack mentioned that, well, we saw it in their ranking, but they also discussed it further. They had Coyote Ridge ranked much, much higher in their 5-year trail plan recommendations than we did. The reason for that is that the Coyote Ridge Trail also functions as a mountain bike trail, which is one of the few that we actually have in our area. And it's evidently in disrepair and needs quite a bit of maintenance. So it kind of hit the top of their list since there's very little substitutes for it, and it would provide high utility. I know that wasn't something that we had discussed in our group. So really the only reason I bring it up is it something that we would want to move further ahead in our current ranking? And other than that, I think this was kind of what our current ranking was, and our only remaining task was to vote on it and make a formal recommendation to the board.
Where was the Coyote Ridge?
So can we actually use the trail map right in front of you? So Coyote Ridge is right down here. It's kind of bridging the gap in between these two parts of the upper area of Rock Creek. There's quite a bit of trails in here, and evidently there's also, depending on where we want to go from here, there was talk of making it maybe solely for mountain biking, or making it mountain biking these days, pedestrians the other, just because want to avoid any type of conflict you could cause injury between pedestrians and bikers. But yeah, we're talking about that little O down there. And since most of our rankings kind of followed a systematic approach that kind of followed down McCaslin, it didn't even really make our rankings. So that was the one thing they pointed out that didn't really jive with ours. And if you actually look at ProStack's rankings, oops, sorry. If you look at ProStack's rankings, the trails themselves don't match up with ours very well, one for one, but they actually followed a very similar approach of trying to do it systematically. We followed McCaslin as kind of our starting point, trying to finish a system there. Their idea was to try to finish up the Colton Trail connectors. So very similar ideas, and we look at it, we're actually not too far apart. We just had them ranked in different orders within the system.
So, I guess there's just a reason not to. It seems like we should be, supportive of ProStack. I guess my initial reaction in the fact that if it's a place for mountain bikers, that's good because it keeps them off the walking trails.
And to note, the Coyote Ridge Trail is actually on open space. That is the Coyote Ridge open space, so it's not a park. It is sort of that open space, as Ken said, that goes between the Yarrow side, Rock Creek neighborhoods, and the mountainside, so like the South Pool. It's that area right in there. Sean, do you just want to introduce yourself just so?
Yeah, hi, Sean Samuelson, co-vice chair. So I guess my only question is if we were to rank this in a similar fashion, what would we not be getting in 2015 for trail if this goes as top one? We had priorities for a reason. I understand the need for maintenance and connectors and such. But has anyone actually gone over there to see what is being referred to, or any?
I've been over there. It's a steep area, which allows for just kind of, whereas most of it's single track trail, it's a steep incline, and kind of loops at the top. I don't know exactly what type of maintenance they were referring to that they would need. I'm not sure if I were doing my own ranking, whether I'd put it as number one, but I'm also not sure, after hearing why they had it so high, that I'd leave it at the very bottom of our list either. And also, to your other question, what would we not get in 2015? I think that's a hard question to answer, especially with our later on agenda item of how do we want to continue with spending the funds in the open space coffers.
So I think, and one thing to note, I'm not sure that it was necessarily even just moving a trail connection up, because I noticed on the list that it's sort of a Coyote Ridge trail connection. I think they're more talking about maintenance on the actual trail itself that exists, not necessarily expanding it, but how it exists today or when it went into.
So it's not the $23,000 budget item, it's something else?
Can we pull up their?
They still had it as that
23,000, so
yeah.
I'm not sure that that is an accurate number. Just looking at it, because it was more, they were talking about maintenance, not necessarily.
Yeah,
not
they certainly
necessarily
were.
adding.
I remember
a
seeing
connection.
it in their ranking though, and it was that same line item in their ranking.
So if this is the area between Yarrow and South Pool, I have been up there, and it was really kind of unusual. The trails had sort of a crack. You know, there was lots of cracking going on, like extreme drought or subsidence or something like that, to where, you know, I worry about my dog stepping in one of the cracks that were that big. So maybe what they're talking about is shoring it up somehow so that bicycles can be ready.
There was also some discussion in some forum, some of you were at, about the creation of a volunteer trail maintenance group in the community. And so I'm not sure if this is all expected to be outside trail maintenance or if some of it is intended to be done by community members.
Yeah, I know they're trying to form a Superior Mountain Bike Club that they're hoping would do some of that maintenance. But I do think that they are expecting that there might be some dollars, because there is some shoring up that has to be done. And then I know when we did talk that night between the committees, it definitely was put in place as a mountain bike trail, and it is used that way, but it's also used quite frequently as a walking trail. So we would have to think about how the community feels about that, and it might be switching days or does the possibility exist of having two trails in that area, one that would be designated for walking, one that would be designated for the single loop trail.
So what might make the most sense, Allison, do you have the 5-year trail plan with the updated numbers on it that we can pull up by chance? If we go through and actually see what our current priorities are, we can figure out what we're willing to actually postpone. So that might be our best starting point.
And it might be that folks don't want to postpone anything.
If we
and
even want
and
to
this
postpone.
gets shelved down to part of number 7 too.
Yeah.
And I guess while that's being pulled up, in the interest of aligning with ProStack, I think our first priorities were to create more of a regional system and connect our trails, which, if we keep those as our priority, it's not until roughly 2017 where we start to have these little loops, and it gets away from our priorities. So it feels as though to compromise somewhere in 2017, somewhere around item number 7 or 8 would be a possible spot to look here.
All right, so our number 1 was that viewing station over by the Hodgson Harris Reservoir. I assume that's still kind of our top priority since we just got that opened up and want to make full use of it. As Sandy mentioned in our last meeting, we talked to one of the Boulder County commissioners, and we'll have to work with them to actually use that land, because it's their land that would actually sit on, so it'd have to be a joint project. But then number 2, it's hard to see from here, but it's that kind of green.
Matt, could you grab the light
Light.
switch on the left, I think?
It definitely helps. So number 2 is in the middle, right underneath the reservoir on the left side.
I think that's still really important.
Yeah, number 3 connects that one, and then number 4 is above it, with number 5 right above that. So that was very intentional, making sure we could get that system going as soon as possible. 6 and 7 is where we kind of diverge from that a little bit and go further south, where it's that yellow line, and number 7 is the one right above it that's kind of turquoise and blue on the right. So I think my personal feeling is if we were to move this up and we wanted to actually prioritize it, I'd say above 6, making it the new 6 is the earliest I'd personally want to do it. I don't know how everybody else feels.
How did they rank 6 and 7? Is that, because I know you said that they were more concerned, like, the southern area and towards Colton. Was that high on their list? Or?
That's a good question. I don't remember.
Like bumping down something else that's high on their list just to have the Coyote Bridge.
I don't remember exactly where those landed. But one thing that, so our list and their list this year, in talking with the between the two committees, we decided we're not going to try to gel the two lists and make them one. We'll try to start that effort next year. We're working together sooner. So I wouldn't honestly worry too much about trying to make ours look exactly like theirs, and whatever we feel is important, let's just keep as is and not necessarily move around just because ProStack did it. We just brought up Coyote Ridge because it was something that we hadn't even discussed and thought about during our rankings.
Yeah. I think that was more the point. And their rankings also, I think we went down the west side of McCaslin. Some of their rankings involved connecting some of that east side because they were, for safety reasons, they were thinking some people wouldn't cross the street as much. So I think that was part of their thought as well, as connecting on that east side. So we sort of did the west side thinking get us out to the open space on the west and the county side with the exception of the reservoir. And they also had that same thought, but also thought of some safety things on the east side of moving people between neighborhoods. So I don't necessarily think we have to change our rankings at all, but I think Ken and I just wanted to make sure we, brought to your attention some thoughts we hadn't thought of as a committee that we thought were interesting, and just bring it back for discussion. But if folks feel that, we've nailed it pretty good, and as Ken said, our thought for next year is to connect much earlier as our committees and work on them together, we can certainly, we're really talking about the budget for 2016 at this point, not necessarily as far out.
Yeah, just a quick recap for those of you who weren't here, didn't call in last week or last month. The idea is that we'll get together with the ProStack leadership much earlier. What might be a good starting place is to, and this was all just kind of spitballed, it's not set in stone or anything, is to have each committee member do a ranking. Then we can either mesh all of the rankings together between ProStack and OSAC to have a giant list, and then also create what a ProStack list and an OSAC list might look like. That way we can see what everybody's overall ideas were and then see how close we were, and then as a group try to come to some type of consensus rather than doing it separately right now. That was just kind of how things got left in that conversation.
I think I would move that we just leave the plan as is for now, and then if there is an adjustment needed next year, when we meet with ProStack, we do that. Because we've been working on this for, what, 4 or 5 meetings now?
Oh, yeah. We definitely make a recommendation tonight.
Yes.
Do other committee members feel the same?
I guess I would still like to move it up above, make it the new 6. I'm not a mountain biker, but I think I'd like to respect other uses of open space as well, and keep mountain bikes on trails and not tearing up other parts of open space. Sort of a concession towards a sign of cooperation.
I'm in favor of that as well.
So we have a motion to keep it the same and a motion to move it up to number 6. Thoughts from others on that?
Or any other ideas at all.
Yeah, any other? Sure. That's a good point.
I would say I'd like to make it the new 6.
I agree. I think it's good to have a little bit of variety once we get our basic foundation of what was agreed upon, the main goal. After that, to throw in a little bit of variety.
So make number 16 the new 6, if folks agree with that, and then just push everything else down.
Yes,
One.
can we leave, though, if we make it the new 6, can we have 6, 7, 8, and 9 still in 2017?
So one of the things that we're going to talk about later tonight also is whether we want to start using some of the money from the open space fund to make our trail creation faster. So that's a hard question to answer.
And these years weren't decided upon because there was a recommendation regarding having just a list as a ranking and not by the year. So this template had years in it, and really they haven't been divided out the way the committee might want them divided out if they were to divide them by years.
Furthermore, the board decides on the allocation per year based on staff recommendation. So frankly, just a priority list of 1 through 20 or whatever
That's
works
much
best. And then depending on budget constraints and, other priorities, et cetera, as many will be picked out as can be accomplished. So I think I'd look at it as a rank and not an allocation by year.
Okay, I'm good with that.
So is everybody in favor then of moving it up to number 6 and then everything else just falling one down?
So with the understanding that this isn't done by year, because I know in 2018, theoretically, we had 4 there, so it seemed like we could have 4 in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, I
but-
think it's just the
Yeah.
funding.
Right.
So,
Got it.
So we have,
All good.
Maybe we could do all 20 in 1 year.
I'd love that.
Can you make that happen, Sandy and Matt?
Allison, I'd also like to mention number 9 is actually not on this map. That's the Shan Shan Trailhead we proposed. Which is up by number, between 4 and 5, I think. That would be number 9.
Thanks for catching that, Sean. Is there any other change?
I move that we move forward, moving 6 up and
Anybody second?
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
I think, was that unanimous? Sorry, I didn't see all the hands. Okay. So Allison, with those changes, then that will be our recommendations. Next, we're moving on to discussion item number 5, the Chili Fest, and discussing public outreach and the collaboration with ProStack. So I know we've gotten our booth. We are right next to ProStack and their booth, right?
Actually, they
Or did we get moved?
decided to, ProStack agreed later to merge the booths together.
Oh, okay.
So OSAC and ProStack will be together beside Boulder County Open Space. And I went ahead and did our trails map, has Shan Shan property on it. But I put letters instead of numbers like the group talked about. And I'll have 2 of these done for Saturday to do the informal outreach.
I know we had talked about having like questionnaires that say like how you use the trail or.
So we have an update on that. We reached out to ProStack because as we had talked about as a committee, we wanted to work with them to try to move forward on this idea of doing the whole reach out at Chili Fest and get public opinion to try to help shape where we should be going with our trails ideas and rankings for the upcoming years. And ProStack brought up some good points that we really do have a lot that we were trying to get out of this very brief and short questionnaire, and to try to get people's attention, and for probably 5+ minute questionnaire, especially right next to the entrance to the beer tent, might not be the best ideas. So what was proposed by them, and pretty much in my mind makes a lot of sense, is instead of doing a questionnaire where we're asking people to do it, we'll keep this informal, where we'll have that board and another just like it to show people, talk to them about what their priorities are. As we're engaged in public, we'll take notes and have that in mind. But what we'll ultimately end up doing is we can use the Engage Superior website to actually reach out. That way we have more time to actually formulate these questions better and make sure that we're touching all the bases we want. That way we can cover it all in one foul swoop instead of thinking a little bit later, oh man, I wish we would have thought about this. So right now it's just going to be informal, and then we'll work with staff and ProStack to create one of those questionnaires through Engage Superior down the line. Hopefully in the not too distant future.
Mhm. Now, I know I'm planning on getting there a little after 4 and doing the tail end. I know others are planning on different parts. Do we have the whole 2 to 6 covered, as far as we know?
I can come at any time. Yeah.
For the earlier side of the afternoon. Whatever works for everybody.
I think as long as there's at least 2 or 3 people, we're fine with coverage. Does anybody else?
I can be there by 2. That's okay.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
I can join, but I'm just not sure of my son's football schedule. so.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I'm going to the Buffs game, that's why. I'm not getting there till 4.
There's a bunch of stuff going on that day.
So, yeah, no, okay.
I think between OSAC and ProStack, since we're sharing the booth, we're going to have plenty of coverage there. It's not going to be an issue.
Okay,
Yeah, that should be good.
okay.
Allison, as far as setup goes, do we need to be there a little bit before to help set up, or is that something done by staff, or how does that work?
I can make sure that your banner is up with ProStacks. I'm not sure how we're going to formulate that. I'm sure Katie has some type of idea. We'll have tables there for you and chairs, and I'll make sure that these maps are available for when you get there.
Perfect. So it'll pretty much already be there.
Yeah. Can we just add
In case you need any help.
can we just add a couple of notepads and some pencils or pens too, just to have it there as well?
Did we have any leftover, like one of our gift bag things that we had at National Trails Day?
Well, one of the things we talked about doing was having the passport program be at the committee booth, and that people could check in to get their passport stamped with you guys like we did at National Trails Day.
Yep.
And also give you some of our prize packs to hand out for people that have filled out a certain amount of the passport program. And if that's okay with everybody, I kind of talked to the chairs about it. That would be something you would be okay with?
Yeah.
That would be great.
That's fine.
I might suggest having 8.5 by 11 versions of your poster, so if there are 10 people there, they're not all clustered around the poster, they can actually look at their own.
Yeah, and I have a second one of these too, and I'll make some copies of those. It's a great idea.
And then just to follow up, one of the things Sandy asked about at our last meeting was seeing if we could reach out to Boulder County to get some of their nature pamphlets. They had those over at the Hodgson Harris Reservoir opening. Unfortunately, those are quite expensive, and they declined.
Are they bringing them, though, if they're going to be there?
I'm not sure if they're
She
bringing
told
them.
me that it's usually just for smaller events like the reservoir opening where they don't expect a lot of people to take them versus big festivals where they would expect tons of people to grab them.
Yeah, the price
Yeah.
was $4 a piece.
Yeah, we voted it down via email. The price was a little steep, so
Really nice.
for, that would eat up a lot of budget.
I have one for sale if anybody wants it.
Are they on eBay yet?
Great, so I think we're covered then. Allison, you'll let us know on the prize packs how strict we have to be, right?
Yes. I'll let you know the day of.
Yeah, sounds good. All right.
I don't think we're going to be that strict.
Okay, that's fine, just, so that, sounds like we're all set for that, and I like the idea of the engaged superior. I think you're right, like that might, this is a good introduction to people in town and then to the community, and then we can follow up with the survey afterwards. Moving on to discussion item number 6, the open space property beside the Ridge property, which is just up over the hill. And there's started a discussion last month on that. We know that it's up for sale, and just sort of gauging, is there any interest from OSAC to sort of add that? It really wasn't on the list prior, it wasn't a property.
To the right or to the left of the ridge? As you're raising it to the right?
Yeah.
Kind of between the ridge.
In Key Bank, yeah. Yeah, it's up on the, it's this sort of.
Matt, how many acres is it, and what does it cost?
Hello, everybody. It's nice to see everybody. Nice to see a full committee.
Howdy.
I'm Matt Magley. I'm the town manager. The Ridge 2 parcel, as staff refers to it, is owned by the bank. It's claimed in bankruptcy. It's about 5 acres. It's had a PD zoning at once that expired, so it's currently just zoned agricultural urban reserve, and it's in the comprehensive plan as office is the designation. What was your second question? How many acres and what?
Cost.
Price.
Oh,
you know,
cost.
Price.
Well,
Or-
yeah, I think they currently have it listed for $700,000 or $800,000. It started at 1.2 million. It's dropped since, and it may have dropped since the last time I talked to him. I haven't talked to him for probably 5 months, I would say. And the last time I spoke to them, they were going to. Their interest was to continue to try to sell the property for development, but I left the window open if they wanted to discuss with the town any opportunities that we would be happy to talk to them about it.
Can you clarify where it is?
Sure, yeah.
No, it's right, we see where the pond is right there? It's right below it. Yeah, see the ridge there, and it's before the office park on the top and the ridge on the bottom. It's right in between.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
5 acres, 700,000 to 800,000.
Mhm.
So there is also some kind of an access road that goes up there. I don't know if it's an easement that goes up to that reservoir or what that is. I don't know if we could somehow incorporate a trail or part of number 2 or something into that plan so that it can be arching up into there, or another access point into the larger Boulder County open space there, especially if we proceed with that. Is that white line there? Is that existing or something we're proposing?
That's existing.
That's existing
Okay.
regional. Yeah.
So I don't know if we could use that as another entrance point into the trail system. I did see a car coming down there the other day, so I'm not sure exactly how far up that access road goes, but there is something existing there now.
It would be nice to get a trail connector around the ridge, because if you've ever made the mistake, like I have, of trying to get off the trail via the ridge, I realized That's a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, right now, the only way I know that you can get off the current trail system there is another kind of, it looks like a car trail
Right.
that you can take down
yeah.
to the gate, yeah. But that's not official.
So just something that we talked about in the past with the Shan Shan property is what we want to do with it in the future, whether we're trying to make it a big trailhead where there's some type of parking available or something like that, where we could encourage more regional use. I don't know if it's how feasible it is to do something that large at Shan Shan. I'm not familiar enough with it. But thinking outside the box, if it's not possible at Shan Shan, that's an awfully good alternative right there. Besides that, I'm not sure how much value it holds rather than as an open space
Agreed.
purchase.
I have a question. I know we're open space, but I mean, it seems like we'd also be pulling a relatively potentially valuable piece of property in terms of property taxes out of Superior as opposed to, if it was agricultural and you're not producing a big property tax, and it's an office building, it seems like we're pulling, if we have a use for it like the trailhead, I think that makes a lot of sense. If it's just another 5 acres, I'm not sure it's a good
Right,
investment.
if we can't use it for some kind of trail.
Some
Yeah.
kind of a high value use for us. I mean, unless there's like something about the property that's particularly, important, for our values.
So as a reference point, Shan Shan costs how much, that property?
600?
Was it just under 6?
It was, no, it was just under 500,000, and then we partnered with the county. The county pitched in, I think it was just over 100,000 for the conservation easement for that purchase.
So out of town proceeds, it was 400 something?
A little bit less, yeah. Yep. And we still have to take down the house
Yeah.
after a couple of years.
Do we have to take down the house? Or could we, no, I'm serious. I mean, could we actually use that as another, we have a bathroom at the other trailhead. Could we use part of the house as bathroom facilities, and storage
Or is
facilities?
it septic there, or is it on sewer?
Yeah, it's not on city services. Part of our agreement with the county was that we remove that structure. Yeah.
So do we think then what we would want to do with this property is have folks go out and take the ranking that we have done for the others, and over the next month or so, folks go out, take a look, see what we can get the ranking to folks, the spreadsheet that we used about wildlife and where we saw the value was, and we can discuss it again.
So just to make sure we're all on the same page, when we're making that ranking, are we assuming that that would be a trailhead area that connects to the regional trail there and includes parking, or what do we picture that being? I
The
think that-
ranking sort of starts with just like, do we see any value in it? So for example, here, if you use the Shan Shan property as an example, Shan Shan, prior to the town center becoming a reality, actually had a very low ranking. It didn't have a lot of great vegetation on it. It wasn't, it was kind of scrub brush out there. Folks didn't see a lot of wildlife, things like that. It didn't have a high value. So sort of that's how the ranking goes. What do we think the view corridors are? What do we think, could a trail go on there? That's sort of how the ranking goes. So I think folks just go out and rank it, and then we can discuss the next time if we think that once we get out there and really sort of see it. I think a lot of us just drive by it, so we don't have a full understanding of it. We can see if it might hold more value that you could add to your ranking and say, well, I see the opportunity here for a trailhead or connection.
You might even want to drive up into it, because, like I said, there is a pathway.
Can we do that, or?
Yeah, it's kind of part of that road, I think, is on District 1 property, but part of it's on private property the bank owns. So I can contact the bank representative and just let them know that we might be going out just to take a look at it.
If you could do that, because I know when we did Shan Shan, that was the same thing. We couldn't go on the property, but most of us parked out here in original
Right.
town, and walked over for it,
Yeah,
but we
we do that.
can get that ranking out to folks.
You know, from the South Colton area, the ridge is an important part of the view shed. And, you know, the buildings there really stand out when you're in the elevated areas south of Colton, so people might consider looking at it from a distance too. I mean, my sense is that if there was a building to the left of the current ridge, it would really drastically affect the view shed of the Flatirons from a lot of areas of Superior. I'm not quite sure the right side of the ridge, but I'll give that a look, and then we should think about that as well.
And that is part of it too, like the view of it, what you're looking at.
I think that's one of the reasons we wanted Shan Shan, is to kind of protect that view corridor.
Yeah, that's what also, the thinking that there's going to be development on this side to protect that view corridor there, because it is going to be a different, in a few years it will be different on what you see, and this could be also have the same, like you said, so it's good, I think you're right, if you go up maybe from some different perspectives and see, also from some distances.
The other comment regarding a new trailhead there, you could probably see Colton trailhead from this property, right?
It's a
So
little
it would
close.
be pretty redundant for 700K.
Plus also the fact, I'm not sure the people at the ridge there would want a trailhead that close to them and all the
True.
traffic that goes like over by where you live. You don't want the extra traffic necessarily. So, and plus if you made a trailhead there, would you have to put in a light or a rotary or whatever? Because if you're gonna have people pulling off into it and pulling on, it could be a dangerous spot, so.
So Allison, if we can get that ranking, I know we have it, the template somewhere, and get it out to the group. And if folks can commit to trying to go to it, I don't know if we'll make it for an agenda item for the next one or sort of push it out another month to give everybody time to, to do that. But if we can look at the next sort of 4 to 8 weeks to do that, that might be good.
Matt, you said it's zoned agricultural, but in the PD it says office. Would they have to get rezoned now?
I'm sorry, in the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
It's, yeah, the comprehensive plan, it's designated as office, future office use.
So somebody would have to get it rezoned now, though, right? Since
Yes,
it's
that's correct.
agricultural.
Yep.
So
Yes.
Yep.
could someone get it rezoned for housing?
They could certainly ask and apply. I think what I've heard from the board is that they are interested in residential at that location.
The current board? I was just
Right,
curious.
current board. Changes, yeah.
Election in 2016.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing for us to consider also is, you know, kind of think through, like, if other people bought it, what could they possibly turn it into, so.
No, definitely.
Because I could see on 5 acres, you could easily put 15 houses up there.
Yeah.
Depending on the neighborhood, you could put 40 houses up there. I mean, you know, depending on how you
Stack 'em.
How you stack them, yep.
Right.
But I do think it's also, your point is well taken too, is it, you know, is the value of it good, so, you know.
What's that, you should do the ranking, check it out as a view corridor.
Yeah. And do all the things, and then bring it up at a future meeting. Moving on to number 7, this is our discussion of the Open Space Fund. We started this discussions actually a couple of meetings ago, and I know you guys discussed them last month when I wasn't here, but this is talking about the possibility of, you know, the fund has generally sort of been used most recently in acquisitions, and is that, you know, the way we still want to do that, or do we want to look at maintenance and other things from that fund?
We only have a few more parcels we could acquire, right? The level 3, this one if we wanted, I'm trying to think of what else.
Bulljack,
Yeah.
Zaharias.
Zaharias, Anderson,
Matt knows them all.
Yeah, I mean, there are only 3 on
Turnbull, I think, might be.
Turnbull, over
Bulljack.
the back, yeah.
Yeah.
in the back. So, yeah, there's not a lot left to acquire. And to sort of touch upon it back on our discussion on the 5-year trail plan, you know, are there are we letting this money sit in when we could be using it for opportunities to, you know, move the, some of the trail maintenance up at a faster speed? So, I know, Allison, you sent us a number of months ago, and I'm trying to pull it up here, when the referendum went into play and how that board at that time, 2004, how they sort of ranked it, and just asking folks how they feel about that.
And Allison, I know you and Matt periodically get a chance to get an update from Level 3. Any interest at this point in selling?
Let's take this back from me again. Actually, the mayor and I met with representatives last week and had a good discussion with them about their future plans. They've acquired a number of companies over the last couple of years, had changes in their executive leadership with their CEO and chairman. They're getting through those acquisitions and now incorporating them into their Level 3 corporation. So they see the light at the end of the tunnel there and have started thinking about future and where they're going to put all the people and how they're going to bring all the offices together. The headquarters in Broomfield, just at the ridge there, is their North American headquarters. And it's about 800,000 square feet of office space that's up there now currently. They've, in their future plans at one time, they had up to 1 million square feet of additional office space that they were planning years ago. And then the recession hit and those things kind of went away, and they're starting to come back now. They simply just don't know what their future plans are. It's too soon to tell. They don't know if they're going to expand at that location or at other locations. And right now, they just don't see a need to sell, and they don't think they'll have any decisions made before at least 2 years. So it could be anything after that. It could be 10 years, but at 2 years at the minimum before they have any decisions made with regard to that. So,
Well, that would be the expensive parcel, correct?
yes.
Yeah. That's the one that would really enhance, in my view, the town the most, especially people who live down in that area.
Yeah, it's about 180 acres.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
a
a big
lot.
parcel.
Yeah, because it stretches that whole back.
Yeah.
But some of it, just looking at it, I mean, obviously, you know, they would have to put the work in it. But some of it does seem that it would be a lot of work and money to develop on parts of that.
And they did mention in our meeting that they want their office buildings to be nearby. So yeah, maybe as close to walkable as possible. So it's unlikely that they're going to put buildings on the far west end of that property. They're going to want to try to cluster the buildings together more towards the eastern edge of it.
And that eastern edge is totally in Broomfield, correct? Or is that on?
No.
I'm trying to figure out the
There's
property
a
line.
good 50 to 60 acres that runs, it's in the town of Superior and runs kind of the eastern edge up to Highway 128.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have an idea of the appraised value of that property?
We haven't had it appraised in a while. They purchased the property for about $9 million, I think.
Including what they built on?
No, just the just the 180 acres in Superior. And that was kind of at the high point of the market, and then we had the low point, and we haven't had it appraised since the market's come back. But I think my assumption is that they're looking to get somewhere close to what since they have no incentive to sell, they want pretty close to what they purchased it for.
So with that in mind, and how much we have in the coffers now is what, roughly 5 million that we have?
5.5?
So we currently have, as of July, 4.6 million. It would be a little bit more, but we actually, made some purchases. We bought Shan Shan. We did the reservoir update or improvements, and so that dropped the balance. By the end of the year, we'll have about 5.1 million, and then the balance will grow by about $500,000 a year from there on out. So it accumulates pretty quickly over the years. So I think it's prudent for the committee to start thinking about, what you want to do with these funds. I mean, the board makes the ultimate decision, but you guys advise them on how to use these funds as well. So I think, land acquisition, but other ways, trails is a good use of the funds.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
You've been really good in rattling these numbers off. Any idea how much Zaharias and Bulljack roughly would go for? What we'd be looking at, or just?
Yeah, Zaharias has their property for sale for about $6 to $7 a square foot, and that's for unimproved property. That's what it's marketed as. That's why it's, I think, hasn't sold in the current market, which is there's high demand for land around here. But because it's unimproved property and they want such a price for it, that I don't see that property selling. So I think that would be, I think, in the $5 to $7 million range to purchase. It's just under 20 acres, I think, for that property. You could also, the funds can also be used to buy down development. You don't have to buy the entire parcel. You can buy 5 acres if it enhances a certain buffer area. And the Hodgson Harris Reservoir is a perfect example of that. To protect that northern edge of the Zaharias, of the reservoir, southern edge of the Zaharias property would be a good use of the funds, I think, personally.
And how many acres would that be?
We'd just have to work with the property owner to figure out, what makes sense for them development-wise, and what makes sense for the town as far as protection of open space in that reservoir.
Just out of curiosity, has anyone ever talked to Level 3 about getting some kind of, conservation easement for, 50, 60, or so, some acres? Is there a problem with build on all of it anyway?
Yeah, they've expressed an interest to, as part of our ongoing discussions, they've expressed an interest to keep maybe a portion of the property to develop it and then get a conservation easement or sell the rest for open space. But they just, and we would be open to talking to them about that, but they just right now aren't sure what they want to do with it, and so they're just willing to wait until they can decide what they want to do with it. And then I think we can have the discussions with them at that time. So, if you don't mind, I am here for a reason. We are going through our 2016 budget, so this ties in with your discussion tonight. Something that I have proposed to the town board, and they have not decided on yet, but I thought it was important to come and update the committee on, is we have a park next to Eldorado K8 that we're looking to build, start construction next year. It's an 11-acre park right next to the school to the south. Original budgets last year had construction over a 3-year period. That's not the most efficient way to build a park. We did that here in original town with Founders Park, and it eventually I think we got a wonderful park, but it's not the best way to build a park. So what I propose to the board is that we accelerate the construction to be within a year, or it might be 14 months, 15 months, a little bit over a year, depending on when construction starts. In order to do that, I need funds from another area other than the CIP, because the CIP currently can't handle a $3 million park in 1 year. What I propose to the board is to have an interfund loan from the Open Space Fund to the CIP in the amount of $2 million. that would be advanced next year. And then the CIP would repay the open space fund over 2 years. So in 2017 and 18, the open space fund would be replenished that $2 million from the CIP. This is something we've done in the past from other funds when we've needed. We've loaned funds to District 1 for improvements to the treatment plants at times, and then the District 1 will repay back the general fund at times. So it's kind of a standard practice. The funds that we would borrow from the open space fund would be repaid back with interest, what our standard investment interest is. So there would be no loss there from the open space fund. And it helps get this park constructed in a way that's efficient and gets done within, I'm hoping, a year, maybe a little bit longer, without, I think, any harm to the open space fund balance at its current level. So that's my proposal to the board. I think it's a reasonable proposal, and I'm hoping that the committee can understand my proposal. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have with regard to.
Is there a final design that's been agreed upon yet? I remember this got brought up.
Yeah,
we looked at it
yeah.
with ProStack, and everything was
Yeah.
still kind of up in the air, discussing where to go with it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we ever saw.
We can forward that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have that. The board did agree on a final design. And I'll have Allison forward that to the committee so you could see it. I think it's a good design. It has some elements for, I think, a lot of different people who might come and enjoy the park. And it incorporates some elements that I think will be beneficial to the school as well, since it's so close by.
So is the intent of the park still to be kind of a multi-use programmed area, or just?
It'll be multi-use, but it won't be programmed.
Okay. But there's no track or ball fields or anything?
There's a sand volleyball court and a basketball court.
Kind of like Purple Park.
Yeah. And it has a large green space, couple pavilions, restroom
Where did the restrooms end up?
on the south side,
South
near
side,
the parking
Indiana.
lot.
Near
Near the-
Indiana. yeah.
Circular
Yep.
drive
Yeah.
that feeds
Okay.
into the school.
Yeah,
So that was kind of the upgraded version that was presented, right?
yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
So to build it in a year versus 3 years, big picture from the town's perspective, does that save a significant amount of money overall?
We save, we'll save just from mobilization, because you have to mobilize each time. We are expecting to save a couple $100,000 probably over the condensed timeframe.
And 2 years of student use and traffic.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think the benefits
Yeah.
more is just that the park is, done within the year, and it is busy there, like you said, with, and the folks south of Colton have been looking for a park on the level of Purple Park for a number of years, I think, so. that part.
So realistically, with a roughly $5 million budget, do we anticipate spending out of our budget anything more than $3 million in the next 2 years?
I don't think so, because I mean, even with the 5 million, I think the quickest thing we would jump on, is the level 3, and we're not, if it stays up in that $9 million range, we're not going to be able to, we're going to need some assistance in purchasing that ourselves, like we're not going to make that. I think it's the sort of, we haven't made moves on Bulljack or the other ones. Zaharias, the committees have generally felt it is overpriced for.
Do we have any
What
updates
we
on
get.
Bulljack? We haven't heard anything about Bulljack for a while. Is that?
No, we're trying to schedule a meeting with the property owner to see kind of where they're at, but we haven't been able to schedule that. But-
Yeah. And again,
Okay.
I think some of those are just also, these are the land you can acquire. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that's been a priority for us to acquire.
Well, for Zaharias, though, I've had inquiry from external parties about could that be divided and part of it be open space, and the other part be used for like a church? Because I've had some people approach me about purchasing a certain amount of it and then wanting to, I think you've heard or saw. So I don't know if that's even a possibility. I just dropped the conversation. But if that were possible, would that make it more palpable to raise the priority on the Zaharias property, and then we grab what we can, and then the other part would go to the church?
And I think that's always a possibility. It's something we always look at. You know, there are certain requirements on a development that they have to, they have a certain amount of open space that we usually like to try to get, and we wouldn't have to buy. But in addition to that, there's always that opportunity. We did it over on the Remington Homes property, just to the west here. And I think if a property came up that the town and the open space committee really wanted to purchase, and the opportunity was there to purchase it, and we were light on funds because even if we don't spend any of this $5 million, there could be a possibility that we'd be light on funds. We always have the ability to go out and bond for additional funds, or borrow from the general fund if we needed to, or do a bank placement loan as an opportunity. So we have other means to come up with cash if properties become available in the future.
I was just about to say that something like, just like the Ridge property shows that, you know, out to level 3, much of this is opportunistic, and you don't really know what's going on. But I think, as Matt said, that, you know, there's other places to get money if something, you know, as long as there are other places to get money, as long as, if something comes up that's, really needed, then it seems like efficiency for the town and saving a couple of $1,000, and is good for the town, and reducing the construction period is good for the town.
Is there a precedent for using funds in this nature for loans, and is the town administration comfortable that it's an authorized use of open space funds?
Yeah, that was one of the first discussions we had. I had with the finance director. So we bonded for I think it was $12 million in 2006. Of that, those bond proceeds, only $800,000 remains. So of the $4.6 million balance that we currently have, $800,000 of that has to be spent on purchases or trail improvements or something like that. So the additional over that $800,000 is what we've taken in through tax proceeds since the bond issue, and they're not restricted by that bond language.
I'm feeling kind of conflicted with two different hats on. As a person of Superior, I think this makes a lot of sense, and I totally get it. As somebody on the Open Space Advisory Committee, where the top two things in our mission is to acquire and conserve natural open space lands and associated resources, and to provide for appropriate public use and enjoyment, which would be creating more trails, the opportunity cost of using these funds and taking away from the open space means we wouldn't be able to accelerate, or at least I imagine we probably wouldn't accelerate the creation of these trails. And it might, I mean, I'm not saying it would limit us purchasing anything, but I'm guessing it would stop us from accelerating the creation of these trails, which I think does fall as kind of one of our priorities. So I'm kind of conflicted about this idea.
I'm curious about that. I mean, because it seems like when I look at this list, I mean, you have $1 million, and
I mean, it all comes.
I mean, if you accelerated and have that discussion, so okay, I'm going to spend $300,000 or $500,000 to accelerate trails.
Well, and that's
you have a $5 million balance. You pull $2 million out. We still have I
Right.
mean, I guess I'm sort of thinking, you know, if something really came along like level 3, it's like 5 million isn't going to probably do it. You know, you'd have to get money from someplace else anyway.
It's something, I mean, we just haven't had the opportunity to have that full conversation yet. I mean, we have to, figure out where do we feel comfortable having that minimum balance, that way we can try to pull the trigger if necessary. We know that we have roughly 500K coming in every year. Do we want that balance to be able to grow, so we're only willing to take a certain amount from that? I mean, we have so much that we still need to talk about that I don't even know how to answer those questions. It's just popped up to my head that I know if we deplete some of this, then I personally would feel more reluctant to speed other things up. That way we'd at least have more savings to jump on something if we really needed to. But you're right, I mean, 500 or 5 million isn't, or
Doesn't buy
9
level
million,
3.
yeah. Exactly.
No, but I think it's I think in our thoughts before knowing, I mean, I see both sides as well as the 2 million coming out, but I think our thought was that, you know, oh, we'd spend $1 million and we'd still have 4, but
Right.
now it's.
Well, that's actually why Matt's here. I don't think it's a correct statement that, I hear your concern, Ken, but I don't think it's a correct statement that if, that's the other half of this conversation, it's whether or not you want to prioritize trail work, you know, in the next year and the next upcoming years. I don't think this gets in the way at all. So, Matt, how quickly, let's say level 3 became available next year after the $2 million loan were executed, how long would it take for those funds to be paid back to the open space fund, and would it impede the acquisition of level 3 if it became available?
So what I'm proposing in the budget is we repay this loan over 2 years. So first payment in 2017 and then 2018. So it's, you know, within 3 years, the fund's fully replenished. And then in addition to that, we're estimating $500,000 in new revenues beyond our debt requirement. We have a debt payment as well that's covered, but this is the $500,000 that I mentioned is our conservative estimate for new funds just to the balance of this fund. But in speaking with our finance director, who's a very conservative person, I think we could have a bank placement loan within 4 months in place. And dealing with level 3, which over the past few years take that long just to get an agreement done with them on any sort of a purchase or.
So before we go any further with that, to Ken's point, what are just the general committee's feelings on accelerating trail maintenance or trail improvement, or, you know, do people see that that's a good use of the fund, or would want to keep it more, you know, for the just sole acquisition, or just to get sort of a pulse on how people felt?
Well, that's why I asked what was left, because there's not that much left, with one of major interest obviously being level 3. And frankly, they're going to sell in 2 years. You know, how long has it been on the plan for us to talk to them? I mean, and you've been talking to them. It's not like you didn't talk to them.
Right, yeah. I've been actively talking to them for the past 5 years, and then we had an agreement to purchase. We came pretty close back in 2003, I think it was, and then the economy started to die down and things kind of fell apart. It might have been a little bit later than that, but so yeah, we've been talking to them for a while.
And then to me, Zaharias is outrageously expensive. That's almost like, why would we do that? So I guess my feeling is I'd like to accelerate some of this to get the trails moving faster. And then I personally, just off the top of my head, without really thinking through it, don't have any issue with the loaning $2 million to the town. But I'd like to accelerate the trails first. That's sort of my main priority. But I also don't want 3 years of construction over there. So that's annoying to everybody on that side. And the school, I think it's detrimental to the school.
mean, Sandy, if your thought is that we could still go ahead and accelerate this trail creation with still
Right.
doing this loan without that being any issue.
So Matt, would you review what the projections are? Because we've gone over with you, or Allison's gone over with you, that we just had 2 long meetings for the 2016 budget. All the trustees attended, in an off session. And was it $200,000 in 2016? And what was it in 17 and 18?
I thought the 17-year budget was 400,000 or in that range for trail construction. And I don't remember what it was for 18, so I
It was
apologize.
back down to 200 or so. We can call it up.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of discussion around this topic, and that would be done. That's why your 5-year trail plans are really important. And that's why I'm really happy that ProStack and OSAC in future years will work together on prioritization, because you understand that as long as you don't work together, the arbiter is the town board. The town board's the arbiter anyway, but we're less likely to disagree with something that comes to us unified than disparate. So all the pieces are coming together, I think, for a real wise way of doing this trail thing. So that's where.
And assuming the costs are accurate, I mean, our top 5 items is about $350K, and our budget grows $500 a year. It sure feels like an appropriate use of our funds, given our mission.
Oh, yeah.
And, with that, the 350 is still, with a $2 million loan, is not that far off, right? I mean, that still seems manageable in that respect. I think, like you said, it does put us a little bit, if something comes up, and how quickly can you move on a property? Because some of them do seem to move very quickly when they do. Like, I know Shan was we talked for years with that owner, and then it turned around in less than a few months. I mean, less than 6 months, I think that turned around, going from, they don't return our calls, to, we're selling, and we've got to coordinate with Boulder County, and it happened, so
But it just seemed from what Matt, you could say if I heard you correctly, that, if the opportunity comes up where, in June of 2016, we needed $4 million, we were down $2 million, that there are other sources of funds to, if something really important to the committee in the town comes up, we're not really including it.
I would say that's correct. And one of the big things is the tax that's in place, there's no sunset on it. So when banks look at that, they see that as a relatively stable tax, and so they're more willing to do a direct bank loan placement with the town, and especially with the balance reserve that we currently have, it even makes it more favorable. So, yeah.
So I guess the question is, what secures the $2 million loan? I mean, does the bank say that that's a solid loan back to the fund?
We do certificates of participation is the most likely avenue. And what that basically means is we put up some other asset as collateral, whether it be the wastewater treatment plant or the water treatment plant or something like that, something that's the bank can say, okay, that's good collateral. In addition to the tax revenue that you've shown over the past 10 years, we feel comfortable in providing this loan to you.
I would think the only other thing is, what if we go out and do that assessment of that parcel that's 700 to 800K? That, we never really thought we'd want Shan, and then we actually ended up wanting it. So then that would take us down from 2.5 million, take us down to about 1.3.
Our typical standard purchase price that we are comfortable with in past purchases is about $85,000 an acre. and that's what we really try to stick to, something like that or less. So we would have to, what they're asking is more than that. So we would, have to make sure that we're comfortable spending more than that on a piece of property. So that's something to consider as well.
Would have to
Yeah.
have some darn good reasons.
So, what do you need from us tonight, man?
Yeah, you're looking for a recommendation?
I just
or-
wanted to let you know that this is being proposed. The board's going to have additional meetings on the budget. We have a budget policy discussion on Monday during the work session with regard to some new positions that are being proposed in the budget. And then we have our official public hearings coming up in October. So I wanted to make the committee aware in case you have any questions for me, or after the meeting you have additional questions, or you're always more than welcome to come down to the town board meeting and as well to provide public comment on any parts of the budget, but specifically the open space fund as well. So I don't need any specific action or anything. I just want to make you aware and be available for any questions that you might have for me.
In exchange for the loan, can we get a sign that says "Brought to you by OSAC"?
Maybe, on the name of the park, we could put,
Facilitated by
by
the
Open
Open
Space
Space
Committee.
I'm sure ProStack would love that.
we'd have to give them some recognition too, I'm
Yeah.
sure. So, yes. Right? Right. So, sorry if I preempted anything
We just
on the
named it
agenda. so-
Advisory Committee Park.
Park, yeah. No, thank you for coming and letting us
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It's really good information.
Yeah, and all of the information. For others, how's your, it's like, so just to get that pulse on, do folks think that it's worth spending money on? Is it worth saying like a percentage of, is it a 5% that we say that we acknowledge that we would want to do, or not put a percentage on it to the town board of saying what we thought would help accelerate either trail creation and/or, open space trail maintenance?
Well, for us, on that purely arbitrary, 50% of the interest income that comes in would sort of be like, a target, so but that's arbitrary.
No, but that's an extra $250,000
Yeah.
a year.
Sales tax.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, the sales tax revenue of saying, well, because I do know, just to be clear, because it does happen every so often, so like on this, and I know the years, Allison, aren't, but, the single tree was sort of funded or thought at some point from the budget would come from open space even itself, so some of that already happens that the open space fund puts into the town budget for some of this, just to be clear. I think we're just saying, we look at a little more of it, or a target of, like you said, the 50%, or,
Only for a couple of years to help out, to accelerate,
Mhm.
give us all an opportunity to use the open space more than we purchased.
Well, I would think, though, if we put it in place, I don't actually think it would go away, because I think you would go from accelerating to then turning around and maintaining.
Yeah.
That seems to be some of the issues that we're seeing, for example, how we were talking about earlier, the Coyote Ridge, is that it was created, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of maintenance on it. So that's so I think it would be something that wouldn't just be a sort of 2 or 3 year thing. It would be like, this is sort of what we're targeting for creation and maintenance of those trails.
I mean, I think it helps, for the voters, when they look at property tax, look at sales tax and other taxes, that they, that they see immediate benefits also, not just a fund keep growing.
Yeah, and just looking at sort of what's out there.
No trail work no trail expansion's been done in 2015, right?
No, not.
You're right.
Yeah, that was all
Because of certain
floods.
constraints.
Yeah.
So you will have years that it's zero because the funds are needed elsewhere. So this is, a real proactive stance to take if you want to facilitate the development of some things, meet some of your objectives. I don't know whether to standardize it with a 50% number of sales tax revenue. I haven't thought about that enough. I think that needs more thought. But obviously, there's going to have to be discussion. Staff proposes in their proposed budgets, and that's what they've done in this. They do it in 5-year increments. And any sitting OSAC board would have the ability to look at those numbers and say, well, that's about half, or that's a little more than half, but we want to, whatever. And every budget cycle, you have the opportunity to comment and try to affect that decision. You know, say it's not big enough because we would like Coyote Ridge to be prioritized this year, or it's too big because we feel our reserves are getting a little low. So that's my instinct, is to keep it somewhat loosey-goosey and just be activist in the whole budget cycle and look at those numbers every year. And budget meetings are public, as is this whole process upcoming of public hearings and whatnot. So that sort of feels right to me, is to keep it a little open. And then you just make a internal pledge within the committee that you'll be activist in that process.
So I guess my question at this point is, what is the best mechanism? So we're going through the budgeting process right now. Is this something that coming out of OSAC with a recommendation to increase our trail creation by like an extra 3 trails? Is that the best way to put this? Or, I mean, what's to make sure it hits the budget? I mean, if, let's say, we're kind of late in the conversation now to have it in this budget conversation, that doesn't preclude us from speeding up trail creation this upcoming year, does it? I mean,
No.
Right.
So
what are your thoughts on it?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, and it's not too late, I would say, for this year's budget, especially with the fund balance that this fund has. It's an easier change to do rather than the CIP, where if we advance something, we usually have to push something
they're not
out.
turning us down if we're bringing money to the door.
No, yeah. So I would say if you have a priority of 5 or 6 trails that you would like to see done next year, I will have to talk to my staff to make sure they have the resources to get those done in a year. But then I would say that would be a recommendation you would make to the board. These 5 or 6 trails, you're willing to spend the estimated amount to build those trails within the open space fund, and then the board can consider that as part of the budget.
my next question, probably closer to for Sandy. I mean, right now, so we just made our recommendation for our 5-year plan. ProStack's giving theirs. When we make a recommendation to move forward with like X number of trails, 1, 2, and 3, I mean, politically, it'd probably make more sense if we waited to hear what ProStack said and see what the board's priorities are. Are we now in a waiting game before we can make a full recommendation to see what the board's thoughts are for?
Well, you're in the middle of change here, right? So there are going to be, it's going to be a process. And again, the more unified you guys are on your joint priorities, the easier this gets, right? Because you're unified. So the board doesn't have to enter into this, right? Except to approve it, which I think is much likelier with agreement between the two committees. So I guess my instinct really is we don't have to jump the gun in any way, shape, or form. 2016 is well in process. So why not go with sort of the staff projection of $200,000 this next year for 2016, and understand that will be as approved by the board for the specific projects. And then for 2017, try to come up with a joint approach. And whatever OSAC makes that recommendation out of the Open Space Fund, but the joint approach is on the trail priorities. So maybe incorporate that into the 2017 budget.
I have the feeling, I mean, I get the sense that we'd like to make a recommendation to start moving faster than waiting until ProStack and OSAC are working together.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Speed is good, but understand, I just think that there's the potential there for you guys having a certain number of priorities and ProStack having a certain number of priorities, and then the board has to play King Solomon and decide which of those will actually go forward.
What happens exactly with the 2 5-year trail plans you're getting from OSTAC and ProStack? Do you guys sit there and mesh them together and say this is what it is?
No. Typically, we haven't in the past. We take the recommendations from both committees, and then if there's money in the CIP that's allocated for trails, then it's up to, we work with the committees to figure out which trails they want to build within that year, within that budget. Okay. So, and I would also say that next month we're looking to have final approval at the end of the month for the budget, but you don't necessarily have to determine which trails to build by the end of October. If you have, let's say you allocate 300 or 350 or 400,000 for trails, staff's not going to go out and build those trails in January. Right. So you have from now till probably March to work with ProStack if you want, to try to figure out which trails you want to build, work with staff, figure out how many trails we can build within a year. And so we have some time, I would say. So it doesn't have to all be decided tonight or by October. I think the most important thing that needs to be decided is how much you feel comfortable spending next year on trails.
So, I'm sorry, I guess I'm a little confused. So in 2016, we had the single tree that's 180K out of open space. I mean, what's the process that decides whether that gets funded? It's not out of CIP. I guess I'm sort of don't understand how the priority gets set for.
Matt, I don't know if you have in front of you what, it just has those budget categories next to it where it's coming from.
Sorry, I'm just confused here.
Oh, good question. I don't understand the same thing.
This template was from the prior years, and what I did was when I took all the trail information, I just copied and pasted in the ranking that you had put it, but I hadn't changed anything about the fund, where it was coming from, and I hadn't changed the years because you were thinking
So
about
is it
just a ranking and not a fund or a year.
So is it Martin's team that sort of put the priority on the fund? Is that where that fund came from? Is that?
I would have to check with him and Patrick to see if they identified where those funds would come from, and I'm not sure. I don't believe we have any funds in the CIP allocated for trails next year.
Okay.
I think that square needs to be taken off the template, actually, because frankly, no advisory committee should even be concerned with that, right? You're supposed to be concerned about identifying your priorities, and how any priorities get funded is a staff responsibility and ultimately a board vote. So I wouldn't mess your heads up with that.
Well, I guess where I was coming from is that it says, well, gee, we were going to take, $200,000, out of the CIP, and all of a sudden, OSAC, it's kind of like, well, OSAC is giving 200, is recommending taking 200,000 out of the trails, and it's, an easy $200,000. So, you end up with $200,000 for trail work, or do you end up with $400,000?
Right.
That's sort of where I was coming from.
Yeah. And it gets a little difficult for, like, the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Committee, because they have trails that they've identified as well, but they don't have a dedicated revenue source to fund any of these projects other than the CIP. So they're battling with all the other CIP projects, our streets, and all the other CIP projects that we have, in addition to what they want to do. So, so it's a little different for that committee. compared to yours and how they fund trails. They would like to see probably a like amount allocated in the general CIP fund, but with current revenues coming in and some of the projects we have in there, we're just not able to do that currently, so.
So my thought is we wait and see how the recommendation evolves, and then see if it's in a couple of months, if it's something we want to allocate money to. See how much the town is gonna have.
Jill, is your mic on, or am I deaf?
Maybe it is.
No.
No. I said, I think what we want to do is
Me too.
just wait a couple of months, see how the recommendations come in, and then decide if we want to accelerate them at that time.
Mhm.
I don't think we have to make a definitive decision, oh, we're going to accelerate these three right now or anything.
Well, I agree, especially with the 2 million that we might be lending,
Right.
and then this other parcel that we
Right.
may or may not want to buy. There's too many balls in the air right now. I agree with that. I don't want to make any decisions
When
tonight.
does the 2016 budget get set? I mean, that's where I mean, it seems like if the 2016 budget's getting set in 2 months, and we want to, we want to accelerate trail building, then somehow it seems that we have to interject, through Sandy or somehow, that, that we think that the board should consider using, some open space funds to accelerate trails. So I just don't understand, I'm having a hard time figuring out if we wait
Process.
3 months, whether we.
And I understand that. I mean, we are looking to approve the budget at the end of October, the first meeting in November, depending on if we need additional meetings or not. You have $200,000 allocated or proposed for 2016 for trail construction. I believe that's correct. I would say, given your current balance, that if there was additional trails that the committee felt after the budget was approved that you wanted to build, the board has the ability to approve that construction of those trails.
After the budget's been set?
After the budget's been set, and then at the end of 2016, we always do budget amendments for any unforeseen expenses that have come up that we needed to spend, whether it's an emergency, something with the plants goes wrong and we have to spend more money than we expected in 2015. We'll approve that contract and then do a budget amendment at the end of the year to recognize those expenses and incorporate them within the budget. And the only reason I bring this up is because with the current fund balance, if you had additional expenses that the committee felt you wanted to make, I don't see there would be any issues on the board, with the board approving those changes.
Even a couple months down the road.
Mhm.
As you said, we could probably even go out to March of next year.
Right.
I also just want to make a point that we keep saying accelerating trail creation. I think one of the things we do want to think is also maintenance. So maybe having staff identify some of these open space trails that need maintenance, because I think that's
Right, yeah.
something that we haven't really, I mean, it's great to create the new trails, but if the other ones aren't usable,
Yeah.
what are we do,
I
Yeah.
agree.
I think we want to sort of shift that focus a little bit too. It's not just the creation, but also maybe seeing some of them and maintaining them
Mhm.
in a better manner.
If they're in that bad condition. As far as I know, Coyote Ridge might be one of the only ones that's in bad shape. I've been on a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean,
Most of
they
them are
might
pretty
be
good. For now,
fine,
anyway.
it's just
Yeah.
more.
When it does hit it, yeah.
Yeah.
Completely
And,
agree.
Just sort of getting into that kind of mindset with the town of saying. So it looks like we're not necessarily crunched to have to do something tonight. I think we wanted to sort of get the, pulse from the committee, have some discussion about it. Certainly, I don't expect the town board would ever turn down money, so, or even town staff if there's an extra fund. So I do see that concern a little bit, like you said, if it was something that they were going to put in the CIP, if it's all of a sudden just, always this fund is going to have to just take over this piece. We're not looking to do that, or I don't think we're looking to do that. We're not looking to be the rainy day fund. that we're looking for it for the improvement of the open space that we have, possibly acquiring. And from my perspective on the school thing, I actually think that our town citizens would be okay with that sort of loan. I think that they would see that as a valuable asset to the community.
Speaking of this design, is it still open for discussion? If we're loaning $2 million, do we also get to have a little bit of open space input if we see something that might be tweaked on?
I would say we will forward you the design. The board has kind of given me final guidance on the design. If there's some tweaks that the committee sees that are valuable to the project, I can always have those discussions with the board.
And the fact is, the design is largely green space. $3 million surprisingly does not buy many amenities these days. I still am flabbergasted at how little. I mean, there's a couple of pavilions, a basketball court, and what was the other thing? Sand volleyball and
Water feature.
Grading costs so darn much, but it is largely going to appear not a swink by any stretch of the imagination as Purple Park, but the green effect of Purple Park. It's going to be a green space there. So visually, what I'm seeing in my mind's eye when I look at it is very copacetic with an open space, green look, So, but Matt can send it to you, but don't be surprised that there are not a lot of cool, fabricated amenities on it.
She and Matt danced around it, but
We like all good ideas, but convince Matt because he has to send it back to the design team.
So, unless anybody had anything else to add to the discussion, we can bring it back up in October. Maybe at that point, Allison, if you can let us know how the budget talks are going. I know they're open for us to attend as well. I know Matt didn't come asking for a recommendation, but I do think if anyone has a strong objection to the loan, now's probably the time to speak about it.
How is the money invested right now? We'll have 5 points. How is it invested? Is it in a money market fund?
We have a large, so we're restricted by what we can invest in by state statute. And it's usually, it has a certain grade that is required. It can't be, it's usually like a para type of investment fund or some government organization fund. I can have our investment policy forwarded on to you if you'd like to see it.
Yeah.
And we're very conservative to the point where our interest rate
It's
over the
minimal,
past
I'm
5
assuming.
years
You're not
is
compounding, Brandon.
0.5%. 0.5% is all the return we're receiving on our, and it's simply because we don't want to put it in anything too risky to where that would jeopardize anything that's invested. So, and we can't because we're a statutory town and there's certain requirements per the state that we have to follow. So, and we're not looking to make a lot of money off of interest income. We just want to have it invested other than a bank and receive some interest income and make sure it's safe. So
It's too bad we can't use the interest income to fund extra trails. I know it's not much, but
Right,
just
yeah.
draw instead of taking from the principal and
yeah,
taking.
yeah.
She's still like a court.
And I appreciate your comments as far as not wanting this fund to be seen from here on out as the rainy day fund or how we finance everything from here
Not
on
that I
out.
thought the town was going to do that, but, I think as stewards of that fund,
Yeah.
we have to be
Yeah.
clear on what it's for.
And I would just say that over the up until now, the general fund, the CIP has been able to fund a lot of the new trails that we've seen. But like we just installed the trails through the drainage just to the east of El Dorado K-8 school. I don't know if you're familiar with those trails that come from the neighborhoods. The CIP and the trust fund help fund those trails, and we're just at a point in these, things will get better, but these next few years where the general fund CIP just isn't able to fund new trails. So, but I don't think that's going to be the case in perpetuity. So.
I have one last question on using the open space funds for trails. So of course we want to be aligned with ProStack, but if we're using our open space fund and making recommendations from the open space list, does the board need to see alignment with ProStack if we're suggesting using our own fund?
Do you want to answer that, or you want?
I think it's Scott. From a board perspective, I'm looking at community benefit. So it's always got to be which has the most community benefit now or in the near future. So that's the smell test I put things through. So that's why I really suggest close working relationship. You're not going to always agree. Board can always be the arbiter. But from my own perspective, I've got to look at community benefit. So if something proposed by OSAC has a small community benefit and something proposed by ProStack has a large community benefit, I'm hoping you guys navigate that outside a board meeting. That's how, how I would decide. Now you. Right. Yeah, and that's where obviously the trickiness comes. If CIP funds are not available for that priority, but it still is a town priority. The referendum, and I've read that language very often, has broad legal usage that transcends just open space acquisition. So, and I had to get that answered to my satisfaction first. Can these monies legally be used, and for what? And I'm comfortable they can be used for an assortment of things. So given that, the board then really has to play final arbiter on how the funds are used, in my opinion. So I'm hoping that there is good process, nice compromise, things come to the board in a nice fashion, and the board doesn't have to play arbiter, but I think the board will play arbiter, and whether or not that ultimately, could there be a ProStack priority that the board might suggest be funded out of open space money? I think it's a possibility, possibly, but I think with the proper process, we're going to avoid that kind of quagmire, that kind of thing. So,
I think we're relatively aligned based on what Ken said earlier, but
It was pretty close. The ideas are pretty much the same. It's just like, for instance, like the way we have our trails ordered, like even though they all go down McCaslin, we have them all a certain way. They have theirs in a different way, but still the same general idea. So they're close. I suppose, is there anybody who needs any other information before our next meeting to continue this, or do we just need to sit and marinate on this for a little while and think about what we want to do, or is there anybody who needs information that will help them make up their mind on what the path forward is with a recommendation?
I actually think Trish had a good approach to this, which is, are there people who are really opposed to it? You know, if that's a majority, that tells you something about your feelings. You know, either one of the ideas that's been presented here tonight. So I guess I'm not seeing a great amount of opposition. I'm seeing more agreement that needs more thought.
I'm feeling that as well. I think we're sort of, I don't think people oppose the loan. And I think as far as, I think where I'm going is, well, what's a comfortable percentage, right? Or what's a comfortable way of saying, you know, target of how do you move things? What is it you move towards? I think it's a difference perhaps of how staff has looked at the budget as well, because they might, you know, sort of these have come as our things. They might have feedback back that would say, you know, this really is where, you know, there's a lot of bang for your buck as far as what to work on that we may not be aware of, and that they wouldn't have presented because they're not thinking that there would be any funding.
That actually might be a good thing, whether it's Patrick or Martin or whoever. If we could either have a conversation with them in between now and our next meeting, or maybe have them at our next meeting, but find out what the capacity is for building per year. That way we can even see what we can max out at. Because that, I mean, if it's really just going to be like 4 or 5 trails, it really doesn't even touch like 300 or 400K, we might not really have that big of an issue. It might just be like, okay, well, then
like
let's hit our capacity.
Let's hit our,
Yeah.
Or we have no staff to do that and it's done, or that's going to cost you twice as much because we have to outsource to staff that we weren't prepared to do.
Well, and that's part of the beauty of your ranking it not according to the year. I mean, it's so nice to be able to do it maybe based on capacity or, say, budget amount, you know, that the board decides to allocate.
And one of the things that just popped in my head as far as Saturday's event, it might be also a sort of informal question that we're asking people. Are they noticing? I know a lot of us go out on the trails, but they might have some feedback about that as well, about some of the maintenance areas or parts that they don't think are well, that we might want to think those about, and what uses do they value, just in that informal, and then as we get in the engagement process. You had something to say, Ken, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it'd definitely be valuable to find out how many projects the staff can do per year.
Mhm.
That would be a very good understanding of what our limits are.
So I don't think we're at yet of an amount to give. I think, and I don't know if it's a recommendation or I guess, or we just say we don't see an issue necessarily with the loan as far as that goes, and then think in October if we're closer to sort of some type of target that we can all feel comfortable with.
You know, another thought prompted by your discussion there among your committee, I always weigh in on surveys, formal and informal, because I've done a lot of them in my life, and I respect that this is informal, but it wouldn't hurt to have a sheet on clipboards for all of you guys in attendance that has prompts, like Jim said, what uses do you value most on trails or open space, you know, however you want to put that prepositional phrase at the end of that. Of the trails, which trails do you use most? And for what purposes, you know, walking a dog, riding a bike, running, whatever you're trying to discern here. So even though it's not going to be a quantitative survey, to make sure you guys are all on the same page, how you're going to guide the conversation with the residents in attendance.
So since we're sharing a tent with ProStack, is that going to be stepping on their toes, asking questions that are just specific, or are they expecting to be asking questions too? I don't know what their intent is, you know.
From my understanding is their intent is pretty much the same as ours, to just get the same general information.
Except there's more park specific, or?
Theirs is, I mean, the way we proposed it to them and said, hey, this is our thought process. We're going to probably want to put together this questionnaire. We want to use Chili Fest as an outreach possibility. Do you guys want to work with us on that? Do some collaboration? They said, you know what, that's a good idea. 5-year trail plan, outreach type stuff, like understanding where the community values as far as the trails go.
is a good idea. And their really only kickback was, let's not rush a formal questionnaire and let's try to do this more informally. So I have a feeling they're going to ask pretty much the same questions.
Oh, Ken, you're sort of the interface there, right? Are you serving in that role? I just interface with them. Theoretically, they can ask park-specific questions, and you can ask open space usage-specific questions, and each of you can ask your own trail things, but at least have a modicum of continuity between your own committee as to what 4 or 5 questions. One, just to facilitate the conversation, so you're not just sitting there going, so I don't know what to ask this guy next, right? So you've got something to guide you. But they don't have to be asking exactly the same things that you're asking. I think the only time it gets a little potentially messy, if you guys started asking, what elements would you like to be added to El Dorado K-8 Park? That's clearly their priority, and you'd be clearly stepping on a toe there. But otherwise...
I agree, but I think from the trails perspective, we will just confuse the average person walking up if you say, well, that's not our trail, that's their trail.
Mm-hmm.
It's
right.
a distinction that doesn't really make a difference, I'd say, to the average citizen.
But I also think, though, I think maybe we do want to have similar questions, because I don't think the person's going to then say, oh, here's the open space person, now answer the same 5 questions for them. We did the combined tent for the purpose.
In a perfect world, I agree.
Yeah.
You guys would go back to ProStack and you'd propose your 5 questions and they'd tweak them and you'd all agree. But Saturday's coming up pretty quick, so I wouldn't overly do it, but I was just trying to suggest a little bit of form.
Well, for a process perspective, we already have a good amount of those questions defined from our last meeting. What I can do when I get home is forward those questions out to the entire committee, and we just say, okay, these 4 or 5 sound good. Just get at least a little bit of consensus on that. And then Allison, would it be okay if you guys have clipboards in paper that you could possibly provide for us to take notes on and that sort of thing?
I'm sure I can rustle up some clipboards.
So what would make sense is whatever the 3, 4, 5 questions there are, we just print those at the top of like 10, 20 pages or whatever. That way we have them on a piece of paper, and then we can just take notes underneath. That way we always have those prompts in front of us, but we're free to take notes as much as we can.
Well, just as a quick informational, from ProStack's perspective, it looks like they were just going to discuss with residents thoughts and concerns regarding trails, and that if they have any suggestions on the types of questions to ask in a survey, and that it's just basically an open dialogue.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what they were intending on doing.
Sounds pretty similar. They were talking about actually using the town to help build the survey.
Yeah.
Good.
I want to be conscious of the time because we're over, so I don't want to...
Last chance to ask Matt any hard questions.
My door's always open. He's always calling and emailing too. So.
Did anybody have anything else they wanted to say about the last discussion item or anything going forward, or are we ready to adjourn?
I've got one last point.
Yep.
I think my term is up in 3 or 4 months, and given it a lot of thought, I'm going to step down and not be subject to renewal for another 2 years. The last few months in the year have really been challenging for me. I've had a management position in Washington, D.C. They let me do it mostly from here, but I go out there every month managing water boilers for the Department of Interior. And so the time commitment has just been beyond what I expected. And then when I get home, I've had family obligations, as we all do. So I've missed some meetings, I've missed some events. I apologize for that, especially recently. We've got a lot of good new blood and talent on this committee, and I think it's heading in a great direction. When I joined a couple of years ago, we had open spots, we couldn't fill them. And now we have more people than spots, so that's great. And I'd be willing to step down sooner if there's someone that wants to step in, but otherwise I'm willing to serve till the end of this term. It's only going to get more challenging for me. I'm taking a new position. I'm actually going to be leaving the federal government and going back to private law practice, having a national water litigation practice with a firm out of California and opening up a Colorado office. So it's a real exciting time, and a time where I'm going to have even more hours committed to work. So it seems appropriate to step down, and I want to announce it now so that we get someone good to come in next term.
What's your preference? You want the town advertises open spots. You want them to start advertising now, or do you want to wait until? I mean,
they can start advertising now. I mean, it probably takes a couple of months.
Yeah, we'll have
Yeah,
to do
cycle.
interviews and, we contact previous applicants to see if they're interested. So, yeah, good pick.
To that point, October 22nd, I am traveling, but that is the next open house for advisory committee, so I was going to, I wanted to mention that tonight and bring it up in our next October meeting, that we'll be looking for someone to come here during that open house and speak. But it's a good time, again, for if we know for sure we'll have an open space.
On open space?
On open space, we'll have an open seat on open space. Well, we're certainly going to miss all your wordsmithing.
Yeah, no
because, you know,
kidding.
you're the one who always
Yeah.
gives, yes.
That's right.
You are always giving us those whereas and all those things that get it in there.
You know, and I look forward to the possible future service for the town. At some point in the future, but not now. Congratulations on the,
Yeah,
Please
cool
roll.
opportunities.
thanks.
If that's it for everybody else, we'll adjourn. Thank you all for your time. The thing stays on.